In 1961, on a soundstage in London, Elizabeth Taylor was making one of the most expensive films ever attempted, Cleopatra, a production so troubled it would nearly bankrupt an entire studio. But before a single frame of the finished film reached theaters, Taylor herself came dangerously close to never finishing it at all. She developed a severe case of pneumonia, one that spiraled with terrifying speed into something far more serious than anyone initially realized. Doctors rushed her into emergency surgery for a tracheotomy, cutting directly into her throat to keep her breathing as her lungs began failing. And at some point during that medical crisis, according to Taylor's own later accounts, her heart stopped. She had no pulse. She wasn't breathing. By every clinical measure available at the time, Elizabeth Taylor was dead, not for a few fleeting seconds, but for what she and others later described as roughly 5 minutes. Doctors worked frantically to bring her back, and eventually, remarkably, they succeeded. That 1961 crisis wasn't an isolated incident, either. Throughout her life, Taylor has been documented as having been pronounced clinically dead on 4 separate occasions, tied to various severe health crises she faced across her decades in the public eye. But it's this particular episode, during the making of Cleopatra, that she spoke about most vividly and most publicly decades later. Years after the surgery, appearing on the Oprah Winfrey Show, Taylor described in her own words what she experienced during those minutes when her body had, by every medical definition, stopped functioning. She recalled a strange, almost impossible clarity, watching from somewhere above her own body as doctors worked frantically to revive her, observing the scene unfold from a vantage point that shouldn't have existed if she truly had no brain activity, no heartbeat, nothing. Then, she said, something shifted. She described drifting into a tunnel, one filled with a warm, welcoming light unlike anything she'd experienced before, not frightening, not disorienting, but somehow deeply peaceful. And within that light, she said she encountered someone she recognized immediately, her third husband, Mike Todd, the film producer she'd married and lost tragically just a few years earlier, when his private plane crashed in 1958, killing him instantly. According to Taylor's account, Todd appeared to her clearly within that space of light, and he delivered a message that would stay with her for the rest of her life. He told her, she said, that it wasn't her time, that she had things left to do, that she needed to go back. And then, just as suddenly as it began, she was back in her body, back in the operating room, back among the doctors who had just spent 5 agonizing minutes trying to bring her back from wherever she'd gone. She survived. The surgery worked. And remarkably, within months, she was back on set, finishing one of the most notoriously difficult productions in Hollywood history. That same year, in a twist Taylor herself found darkly amusing, she won her first Academy Award, Best Actress, for her performance in Butterfield 8, a film she'd actually been fairly indifferent about at the time. She later joked publicly that she suspected the award had less to do with her performance and more to do with sympathy from an industry that had just watched her nearly die on a film set. Whether or not that's entirely true, the timing certainly added an unusual layer to an already unusual year in her life. What's perhaps most striking about Taylor's account isn't just the vivid imagery she described, the tunnel, the light, the reunion with Mike Todd, but the lasting effect it had on her afterward. By her own repeated telling, in interviews spanning decades after that experience, Taylor said she genuinely stopped fearing death after that day. Not because she'd become reckless or indifferent to her own mortality, but because she felt she'd already glimpsed whatever waited on the other side, and found it peaceful rather than terrifying. For someone whose life was defined by extraordinary highs and devastating lows, 8 marriages, groundbreaking film roles, decades of tabloid scrutiny, and later, pioneering AIDS activism during a period when few in Hollywood dared speak publicly about the epidemic. That sense of fearlessness may have shaped far more of her later choices than most people realize. Taylor spent the following decades unafraid to speak bluntly, publicly, and often controversially, whether about her own health struggles or about causes others in Hollywood avoided entirely. Elizabeth Taylor built her legend through iconic film roles, legendary romances, and a public life scrutinized more intensely than almost any star before or since. But by her own account, one of the most defining moments of her entire life happened not on a movie set in front of cameras, but in an operating room in London during 5 minutes when, by every clinical measure, she simply wasn't there at all. If this story moved you, hit like and subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories. And don't forget to check out our shorts on @ThakenUpdate.